The People's Temple Agricultural Project, or as it's mostly known as, Jonestown, was a communist, utopian community. Well, at least on paper it was, when in fact it was quite the opposite to a utopia.
What the is this piece of?
Now, we need to go all the way back to the events that would eventually lead to the drinking of the Kool-Aid, to the head honcho himself, Jim Jones. There's two important factors about our boy Jones. That one, he was a hardcore communist, and second, like any other cult leader, he was infatuated with power. These factors would eventually lead to Jim Jones founding the People's Temple, as it would satisfy his political goals and his desire for power. Now, how does Jones, being a communist, have to relate with his cult? Communism was a big no-no in the United States, especially in the 1950s and the decades that followed. And so basically, the People's Temple allowed Jones to pursue his spread of communism without the fear of the US government, as the veil of religion that the cult was under provided a disguise. With this plan in hand, Jones and his cult throughout its stay in the United States would conduct fake healings, sell phony trinkets, hold conventions and sermons. Through this, the cult would amass 5,000 members. Having moved from Indiana to California, the cult had actually gained a good name throughout California's cities for its help to minorities, low-income citizens, and other oppressed groups. However, in the background, Jones would often use fear to control and manipulate his followers, often citing fears of nuclear war or the government. Jones increasingly shifted the cult to a more communist rhetoric, becoming more public about it, as well as indoctrinating his followers further into communist ideals. Jones would also begin to abuse his members, as listed. Moreover, Jones became increasingly paranoid and anxious. This was further exacerbated by increased media investigation and scrutiny, which was a consequence of the cult's growth and Jones' growing public beliefs. The fact that he did drugs didn't help either. In the end, Jones' paranoia and anxiety culminated in an escape plan from the United States due to fear of a government raid, and instead planned relocation to Guyana as it was determined to be the best suited location. The People's Temple led a massive relocation at this area in Guyana. Hundreds of members oversaw the construction of the settlement, and thus Jonestown was born. Jonestown was not the socialist paradise that many followers had been deceived in believing. Perhaps it was at the beginning, but this notion shortly fell apart, as the settlement quickly devolved into basically being a prison. Jones often studied and mimicked mind control and manipulation tactics used by famous totalitarian dictators, utilizing them against the populace of Jonestown. Everyday life in Jonestown consisted of 8 hours of work, 1 hour of lunch, and 8 hours of study, 5 days a week. Jonestown, despite having most of its populace, including children, working 8 hours a day, the settlement was not self-sufficient and could not produce enough food to feed its population properly. The studying was just a means for Jones to further push his communist ideals and to brainwash the populace further. The prior mentioned abuse got worse at Jonestown, except this time we got the box or the well, and more beatings. And if you tried to escape, well, there were armed guards that would prevent anyone from escaping, and if you were caught, they wouldn't kill you, they would just inject drugs into you till you were a vegetable. Jones' paranoia and anxiety continued to get worse. He continued to fear a government raid on the commune. Thus, he would conduct white nights. It was basically a drill for an alleged government raid. During these drills, the commune would perform rehearsals for revolutionary suicide. They would drink a liquid that was told was actually poison.
Sometimes foreshadowing is relatively obvious.
Eventually, Congressman Leo Ryan caught wind of the abuse and decided to visit Jonestown to see if everything was okay. Despite Ryan deciding to give him a good review, Jones repaid him by shooting Ryan and the people with him. Jones, realizing the end was near and now the government had a legitimate reason to raid the commune, he decided to execute the revolutionary suicide. Jones had a large vat of grape flavor aid prepared and laced with cyanide. 918 victims had unfortunately lost their lives, a majority of them forced to drink the flavor aid or inject it into themselves, or otherwise they would be shot. This massacre was the largest single incident of civilian loss in America's history, up until 9/11. It's important to remember the victims. They were not crazy cultists that got what was coming. They were people. The majority of the victims were African American or poor. They were vulnerable. They came to the People's Temple seeking community, family, a better life, and escape from the prejudice that defined America so much at the time. Instead, they were taken advantage of, manipulated, fed lies, and brainwashed by Jones, eventually being killed by the same man. The impact of the Jonestown massacre was widespread in the United States. A large part of the victims had friends and family at home who had now just lost a significant other. The victims of Jim Jones were manipulated and betrayed. They deserve to be memorialized and respected.